Oh, hello everyone. Welcome to the Econobox garage. Come on inside where it's a little bit warmer. Well, before I get going into the meat of this week's video, if you recall last week, I went through a whole bunch of parts and some of them were not labeled. What I've done since then is I've gone through and figured out what goes where, and just referring back to catalogs and what have you. Some of these are from Moss Motors, some are from Spares. So I've just basically leveled everything. I've got the seat cover retaining clips, the door seal clips, horn push that was already labeled, the hood medallion clips that was already labeled. There's 3 of those. The gear shift cover screws, the screws for the rear view mirror, screws for the headlight rim, the bonnet bumper screws, the grille retaining clips, draft excluder clips, panel screws, and the return springs for the choke and throttle. So now that I've got those all tagged, I've got a better idea of where they go. So I just thought I'd throw that in there just as a catch-up from last week's video. Well, the temperatures have warmed up today and for the next couple of days. I'm going to take advantage of that and get started on the wet sanding on the car. Currently outside it's about +4 or 5, and I have had the heat on in the garage for a bit, so it's probably around +10. So the idea is to take the 1000 grit, wet sand it down, clean it off, and then go with 2000 grit after that, and then take a polisher to it. So that's what I'm going to be working on for the next little while. The worst part is on the back deck here. It's actually not too bad across the cowl. I might just go straight to the 2000 along here and then polish it. So what I've got is I have a bucket of warm soapy water. I have some 1000 grit and some 2000 grit wet or dry sandpaper. And I'm just putting the water up on a cardboard box to keep it off the floor to help it stay warm as long as possible. So what I'm going to be using is this 3M wet or dry 1000 grit sandpaper and a little foam sanding block. It's got a little bit of flex in it to get around all the curves and hollows and that on here. So let's get started. I've got most of the rear deck now sanded with 1000 grit on wet sanding. It's got rid of the majority of the orange peel, and there was a really dry section in through here, and that's nice and smooth now, so quite happy with how that's turned out. Just have to turn my attention down to the lower part here, and then I'll start working my way around, doing the rear quarter panels, the sills, and then across the top. This is the first time I've ever painted a car, so I'm a little nervous at each stage, but I'm really happy with how this is turning out here. I do have a couple of spots I'm going to have to repair. I'm not too sure what happened in here. What I think I'm going to do is get some of this colored paint into a spray can, and then I can touch this part up here. And unfortunately, when I was putting the lights up on the ceiling, I dropped one of the electrical boxes, and there's a chip on the bonnet that I have to repair as well. So I'm going to get back to work now. Get the wet sanding done on the rest of the car, and then once that's done I can get to polishing. Well, I've got the main tub all sanded to where I want it with 1000 grit. So now that that's done, I'm going to get the doors down from up there. I'll set up the workmate and then get to work on the doors, get them all sanded up. So I'm just using 1000 grit and keeping it wet, nice and wet to that. So just trying to take the peaks off that orange peel. And you can see there, that's the color of the paint coming off. So I'll just do half of this and then show you, and then we'll check. It's best to check as you go along. It's feeling pretty good. And again, I want to be careful on the edges, so you don't want to kind of drop over, otherwise you end up burning through the paint. And we don't want to do that. We'll just wipe this down with a clean microfiber cloth. And these are just in the Costco's grab a rag box. I think there's 75 of them in the box for about $16, $17 Canadian. And that's looking pretty good actually. Well, I finished going over the door with 1000 grit. I'm going to go over this with 2000 grit wet sanding before I attempt to polish it. So I'm going to use this door as a practice piece to see where we go before going on to the rest of the car. Well, before I go much further, I'm going to put the bonnet back on the car and get it sanded down with 1000 and go from there, and then I can show you the paint chip that I mentioned much earlier in the video and how I'm going to fix that. Now, if you recall in last week's video, I redid the lighting in the garage, and I had to install plugs up in the ceiling because they were plug-in rather than hardwire. Unfortunately, things did not go quite according to plan as far as the car is concerned. While I was doing that, I actually dropped one of the boxes and it hit the car. So I've got a chip here and a chip here where it bounced off. So before I go and polish the bonnet, I'm going to repair these. Now, and while I've been working on the back of the car, I've noticed a few spots that will need some touch-ups as well. It's you can see here the primer starting to show through, so I've got a bit of a thin area here, and I'm not too sure what this was, but there's also a little chip in the paint right here, and there's a mark in here. I think that's where I tried to get a bug out. Before I go any further on the sanding and what have you, I am going to make the repairs that I need to make on here. And I'll double check anywhere else that may have need a spot of touch-up paint. And then what I've done, I've gone to my body shop supplier. I've had them put this color into a spray can. So rather than getting out the spray gun and the hose and everything like that, I've got the matching paint in that. Now the catch is with this particular one, it's a 2K, and then you'll notice there's a little knob here. So I have to activate the paint, and then I only have 24 hours to use the can up, or less. So that's why I'm going to do all the touch-ups all at the same time. So that is what is next on the agenda. For those of you in the Calgary area that are interested in where I'm getting my painting supplies, I'll just put a link to their store in the description below. I've wet sanded these spots here where the electrical box fell on the car with 400. And then on the other end of the car, I've sanded this little spot here with the 400, and there was a spot in here that needed to get sanded with the 400 as well. So this spot here is ready to go. This spot here is ready to go. And I've also done the same down this edge here where you can see the primer showing through, so there's a little light on the paint. So that's ready to go. But before I go any further, I am going to wet sand the whole bonnet with the 1000 grit, because I don't want to get in here, do these spots, and then discover in a couple of days that there's some more spots that need to be looked at or touched up. So after a little bit of sanding and what have you, I've determined that the hole here is quite a bit deeper than I at first thought. This one is okay up here, although there is a little bit of a notch there. So anyway, what I've done is I've gone and picked up some Bondo glazing and spot putty, and this is the from what I understand, this is the perfect stuff to use for situations like this. And there's a couple of other minor spots that I'm going to do. I'll apply this according to the instructions on the packaging, and then wait for that to dry, which will take a little bit longer than usual because it's only about plus 10 degrees in here today. But we're making progress in the right direction. So I think the spot putty's dried in a couple of spots at the front here, up over here. And while sanding this side of the bonnet, I did notice another place that needed some spot filler. So that's on there. The front bonnet is pretty much all sanded now. I've got the spot filler in place here. And as we go around that, I still have to do this quarter panel with 2000. The deck lid and the scuttle and the other side of the car is all done with 2000. And most of the bonnet is now done with 1000. Both front wings done. So once I get these little spots sanded and primed and painted, then I can move on to finishing off the rest of the front of the bonnet here. Well, that wraps up another episode in the Bugeye Build. If you enjoyed the video, please be sure to share it with your friends, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and don't forget that little bell icon. Click on that, you'll get notified when the next video comes out. If you want to catch up, just click on the link up here, and that'll take you to last week's video. My name is Ian. This is the Econobox Garage. We'll see you next time.